Welcome everybody to the last panel of the day. My name is Tim Profeta. I'm a faculty member at Duke University. I also had the pleasure of working with all three of my colleagues on the panel in this occupation and previous time last year at EPA to talk about some of what we're going to talk about today. The topic today is really the role of the states in the clean energy transition. And we have three great panelists. I'm actually going to start in the middle with Megan Brachtl, who is with the Office of Air at EPA, but importantly here has been the person behind this program called, do you have it on the screen? You don't have your logo on the screen. Yeah, she's got a great logo. The Climate Pollution Reduction Grants, which was a program out of the Inflation Reduction Act to give the states money to first plan how they want to reduce greenhouse gases, and now ask EPA for money to execute those plans. So it's sort of like the mad money for EPA, the states to really design the strategies they wanted for their states. One thing we should note here, those states are about to give their grants to EPA, the proposals, on April 1st. So we're not going to talk about what's going to go in the proposals because ethically we're not supposed to be trying to influence Megan as to which one is the best proposal, and I'm sure Conor's are the two best in the group, and we'll just stipulate that. We're also being joined by Conor Mulderrig from the Governor's Office of the state of North Carolina. So Conor's in charge of taking a lot of what we talked about here and the general level across the economy and try and put it on the ground in ways that works for the state of North Carolina. And then we'll have Aponte from the state of Georgia, who has a similar task at the Georgia, what's EPD? Environmental Protection Division or Department? Division. The Georgia Environmental Protection Division, who had also the pleasure of designing the plan for the state of Georgia to try and secure greenhouse gas emissions reductions. What we want to do is we want to start, I think, by having Megan describe this program a little bit, but like as an architecture for how the states have been asked to become strategic about what they want to do with the clean tech transition. Allow Conor and Hannah to sort of talk a little bit about what their approach was. And then I'm really going to try and create, it's the end of the day, and we don't want to talk at you. We're going to try and create a conversation here about what we got two great Southeastern leadership states here, what the Southeast can do in this. And hopefully draw you into the conversation. So with that, I'm going to give the microphone back to Megan. And Megan, you can introduce us.
Sure. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around. This has been a long couple of days, I know, but hopefully we can end here in a strong way. We'll go out with a bang. Again, I'm Megan Brachtl. I'm an associate director for the Air Quality Policy Division in the Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards in the Office of Air and Radiation at EPA. So I'm actually based here in RTP. We have a big campus for the Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards. There's EPA's Office of Research and Development, and our growing Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights is also growing a little bit in the RTP campus area. So just wanted to point that out, that we are a headquarters office, just very local to all of you. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about jobs. So I'll start out by talking about the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants program. I'm so sorry that we don't have the benefit of our cute little logo that we designed when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed in 2022. Section 60114 created this program. It is a $5 billion program, so it is one of the largest influxes of grant money coming from the IRA into EPA. If you were here yesterday, the administrator of EPA, Michael Regan, alluded to it. He mentioned it. I think he called it the Carbon Pollution Reduction Grants Program, but it is Climate Pollution Reduction Grants. And it is one of the biggest ones, and I am so proud to be leading the team because we think it is it's not only historic in its size and extent, but it is also something. There's your fruity logo. It did show up. Oh, isn't that nice? Thank you. Okay, so it's historic in its size and its expanse, but also in what it does. It is a 2-phase program that starts with planning and then moves into implementation. Just as Tim was alluding to, we are on the cusp of phase 2, but let me tell you about phase 1 because that's safe to talk about, and it is arguably, from where I sit, the most exciting part of the program. So of the $5 billion, phase 1 is for $250 million. This is a program, let me take a tangent here. This is a program for money to go to states, local governments, tribes, and territories. This is not money for nonprofits directly. This is not money that goes into the private sector's hands directly, although they are all involved, but this is going to other government entities. So the first phase, $250 million for planning, for developing ambitious climate action plans. What we're not talking about here is adaptation or resilience necessarily. We are talking about greenhouse gas emission reductions. Carbon removal can be part of this, but we're trying to remove the carbon from our all the emission points. So this is something kind of new for us. We obviously have tried through regulation to go after greenhouse gas emissions from power plants and other stationary sources. That's the office that I'm part of for stationary sources, not transportation. But we've had mixed results. This program helps us spread some money around to get states, local governments, tribes, and territories to do some of the planning work themselves in order to then set the landscape for others to come in and help create investments and do the heavy lifting. Once the planning is done, then you can move on to the implementation. So the way we set up the program was to essentially, we said, if you're a state and you want $3 million for climate action planning, come and get it. If you're one of our top, let's see, I think we started with 67.
You're number 79 though, right?
We're going to be at 82 soon. Okay. But anyway, we offered metropolitan statistical areas. So these are not just the city of Raleigh. This is Raleigh plus Cary plus, like most of Wake County, or, the city of Boston plus all of the outlying towns, what we call metropolitan statistical areas. So metro areas, we offered each of them $1 million. You want it, raise your hand by this certain date that we gave them a deadline for, and it was theirs. As long as they comply with our terms and conditions, but really try to make this as easy as possible for states to put their hands up and for metropolitan areas to put their hands up in a very short amount of time last year. And then we did the same for tribes and DC, Puerto Rico, and then the 4 smaller territories all got some money. They could at least put their hand up for it. So where we ended up was 45 states said yes. DC and Puerto Rico said yes. Because 5 states said no, we were able to offer smaller metro areas in those states some money. Because one of the things you'll see in the legislation, if you go to it, it's very short, but it does say the planning money should go to every state in the country. So we made sure that happened. Rapid City, South Dakota came through. Cheyenne, Wyoming came through, even when South Dakota and Wyoming didn't. Iowa, Kentucky, Florida were the other 3 states that said no thank you. But we've got lots of metro areas in all of those states. So this is what happened about a year ago, where we were able to give this money out and get it into people's hands to initiate the planning process. let me see, what else shall I add at this point?
I think let's let the two states talk.
Yeah, I would love to.
Let's go from there and say, okay, so Conor and Anna, you got $3 million each, right? We're able to take it. How did this planning process? How did this planning process, work for you? How did it help you identify your state's special sauce? What your state could do to sort of be part of the clean tech, energy transition, voluntary emissions reductions, whatever your state chose to call it. Like, how did what sort of trigger was this for decision making? And I think one of the things I think we should draw out here is we've had a lot of I've been on 2 panels with Christina from the White House, who's doing wonderful work, but it comes down to the state level. And in our country, the states is the place where it hits the ground. So like, I'm really trying to say, this is a lesser program of how all this policy we've been hearing about for 2 days really starting to hit the street and what opportunities you've identified. And Anna, you seem poised, and I had Conor's microphone.
Please pull your microphone.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so in Georgia, I'll give you that we have an interesting situation that I can talk about economic development and things that we can do and change. I can't necessarily talk about climate change. And so we had to take the lens of the reason we were allowed to participate is because some of our governor's favorite projects could be funded by this. And he loves all things EVs, he loves batteries, he loves hydrogen. So we took this as a goal of, okay, let's look at this from an economic development standpoint. What can we grow and enhance? And we made sure that our plan tried to talk about all of those different things. And you get to jump onto some of the fun, and I call them fun. I'm a little broken, it's okay. I'm a chemical engineer from Georgia Tech, so I like processes and I love all kinds of techie things. So, sustainable aircraft fuel, we have Delta. We have EV manufacturing coming into the state and battery manufacturing coming. We want to look at hydrogen. We wanted to look at any of those innovative things, but then we needed to look and see what can we do that we preserve in our state that is also very important. And if you didn't know, Georgia is the #1 timber products exporter of the United States. And so forestry is wickedly important in our state. So we needed to make sure that we preserve that, work with our farms and our forestry to make sure that the sinks that we already have that already suck up 38% of our CO2 emissions in our state, which equates to our entire electric utility category. So for us, it was economic development, and then what is it that we can preserve and keep that is precious and important to our state? And farming and trees are really, really important.
It's a little bit like what Danelle was saying in the last panel. Like, you meet people where they are. If your interest is economic development in graphite in Bainbridge, like Chip was.
Yes, and we're getting a new graphite plant in South Georgia. So,
what about you, Conor?
Yeah. So this is actually really fun. Just wanted to say from the start, this is a really fun, interesting panel for me to be on, because I've been at this program has, at the best of times, been the lens in which I've viewed climate policy, and the worst of times, the bane of my existence for the last 4 years or so now. So it's starting out, so I graduated my master's of environmental management from up the road at Duke University, Duck for tomatoes. But while I was there, I happened to run into Tim at the right time and right place to start working on this weird climate federalism, reforming and rebuilding the connective tissue between the state and the federal government during the last administration. Sounded weird, but I was like, all right, I need a job, I need an internship, so I'll roll with it. But back then, working with it, going back to what Megan says, that the fact that you can now say, if you were to come to me back even 4 years ago, if Tim, even though he probably saw it, and told me that, showed me a headline that says 45 states now have priority climate action plans, and like you said, 82 MSAs would be up to soon, that, I would have just that was before really AI took off, but I would have figured it was Photoshop. and it wasn't real. So that's like, it's the amount of progress that's been made, the amount of like, given everything else going on, this program is kind of, in my opinion, flown under the radar a little bit compared to what the attention it should be getting. Because, like Megan said, that's like the lasting impact here. So I've had the joy of being on the beginning end, the general space around this idea, and then I ended up at EPA about a month and a half. Originally, I was planning to work on U.S.-Canada air quality issues, and then Joe Manchin woke up on the right side of the bed one morning and decided to vote for the IRA, and 2 weeks later, Tim calls me on my day off on Friday when I'm driving to go see my fiance's parents and says, hey, I'm drafting you into service for this weird program that you can help me on. So worked at EPA, worked with Megan, and this is where it's just fun to be up here working with Tim in the beginning and middle, and working with Megan, getting to know all the great folks over there at EPA, and then July this year, an opportunity, once in a lifetime opportunity popped up to work in the governor's office for the last year and a half as climate change policy advisor. And one of the big selling points, I was like, hey, I know about this program that you guys are all freaking out about, and I cannot, and then verify with all the lawyers to make sure I can actually work on the program. But then once cleared all that, hopped over, worked on it, and now I've been working on it since. Putting my selfish hat on, we want money, so we're really excited about the implementation part of this coming up. I'm not going to talk about though, but then putting my rational hat on, the plans part is the really important aspect and the lasting aspect. So what it gave me the opportunity to do was because I'm coming into this new space, gave me an opportunity to just see all the connective parts. So it basically was the lens in which I viewed all the other initiatives going on, catching up on all. In North Carolina, we have like a little bit of a slightly different situation than Georgia. We love to talk about climate. It's hard for us to get state funding to do anything about climate because of the kind of the dichotomy of Governor Cooper being a climate leader and the legislature not, which is a fun dynamic to be a part of. But so all these federal investments coming in, this is our opportunity to put into practice all of the great plans and all of the great groundwork that a lot of really hardworking folks at state agencies have put together and really make it a team endeavor. So creating the Priority Climate Action Plan allowed us to go back and look at the Clean Transportation Plan that passed, look at both Governor Cooper's executive orders on climate, work with our Department of Natural Cultural Resources on their Natural Working Lands Action Plan and the flood resiliency blueprint that's coming up, and identify not just what we want to do, but where are the gaps that we need to identify in this new world with IRA and this great opportunity. How do we kind of fill those gaps here? Where do we need to focus this really unique, flexible investment? And then where are the weaknesses that we've had in terms of our own analytical abilities to figure out where the cross-cutting investments are that have all these synergies across these different pots of money? So that's what the PCAP gave us the opportunity to do, and even more so going into the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, which is the next step in this that I'm not going to think about for a solid 2 months after
I'm
we
going
finish.
on vacation.
Yeah, no, same. Tim
For
said,
2 weeks.
Yeah, Tim makes fun of me because I've been telling him I'm getting married for the last year, which is true because that's how an engagement process works. But I'm getting married in a couple weeks and then going on honeymoon, and then I'll think about it. But it's a big opportunity, and it's kind of the way it's like the little push pin that's held together all the other opportunities on the board for us. So it's been really helpful.
Tim, can I just clarify for the audience, because now we've thrown around a couple terms. I just want to make sure that
Sorry.
everybody's... No, it's okay. It's all right. No, you're good. So you got a planning grant, your state, your metropolitan area. You've got 3 deliverables to deliver to EPA within the next 4 years. The first one, this Priority Climate Action Plan, was due March 1st from all the states and all of the metropolitan areas. We also got some tribes who participated and got theirs in early, but theirs aren't due until April 1st, technically. And what you were alluding to, we've got 45 states, DC and Puerto Rico, we've got 80, there were just a couple on the margins who didn't come in for various reasons, not their fault. These plans, these Priority Climate Action Plans, were intended to get the ball rolling for all of these recipients. You know, when we started the program, there were, half the states, you could say, had climate action plans that were done in the last 10 years. Now we've got 45. And so we are covering, these plans, they cover about over 96% of the US population now lives in a place that has a climate action plan, many of whom for the first time. So this is really exciting. You know, this is where it starts. And then the innovation comes, and the clean tech aspect of it, and the innovation and the investment, comes. So the PCAP for states and locals, pretty much done. The comprehensive climate action plan is the second deliverable due under this planning grant. It's due about 1.5 years from now. So go on, get married, go on vacation, come on back, let's get started. But it's going to really ask all the states, and again, all those big cities, to look across their economies, and maybe for the PCAP, they just focused on the transportation sector, or they just focused on something that they would consider their top priority at the time. But what EPA is really stressing through this program is an emphasis to look across the economy, and that's, again, what makes the CPRG program different than a lot of the IRA and bill programs, which are focused on, one particular sector, one particular, whether it's EV chargers or what have you. But this is economy-wide, and we leave it to the grantees to figure out what is important to them, what works for them, what are their priorities, and be as flexible as possible.
Let me ask this question, and I'm going to say something for the audience. If you want to ask, after I get done with this one, if you want to ask a question, raise your hands, and I'll take questions. I want to try and draw in conversation as much as possible. I can probably ask questions until 6 o'clock if you want me to. But here's the question I want to ask all three of you. One of the things about this program is, the agency's trying to seed into the states like the beginning thinking of something that becomes durable, right? That there's strategies and trajectories for greenhouse gas reductions and clean tech innovation in these states and the states actually find their own special sauce, the things that make them, that they think are their greatest opportunities and their greatest assets to bring to this equation. So Megan, how are you thinking about it? And Anna and Conor, how would you advise the agency to best achieve that end? To best say, this is good, that we've got 45 states with a plan now. Now, how do we make it durable? How do we make them keep drawing investments in? How do we make sure they're realizing the other monies that's available from federal government that they can go get, achieve that strategy? Like, what is your strategy, and what would you advise the agency to have as a strategy to try and make this thing last and keep rolling?
Go for the hard questions. Well, can I just,
Sure.
Did you want me to go first?
I think
I
you
heard
should
you
go ahead
name me
first.
first, but I don't have to go first.
Go first, and then they'll advise you.
I can
on
explain at least mechanically what we've built into the program to start with. So, so we really made a big point about, hey, use this planning money, states and cities and tribes, to take advantage of, use this money to sit down and think deep thoughts about how you're going to reduce greenhouse gases across your economy. And we want to see in your plans what you've done to that effect. So part of the plan elements includes having taken a look at other funding streams, whether it's through the federal, these recently passed legislation or other programs or means of investment, so that they're essentially explaining to us what they see out there as opportunities. So, because in part of the challenge is just getting people to focus long enough to, and I'm sure that you guys are plenty focused, don't get me wrong, but it is good to have an incentive to get everybody to sit around the table and think deep thoughts about how to answer this very question: how do we make this sustainable? And I also wanted to add that we're not talking about the implementation grants, but there are some evaluation criteria built into the applications for the $4.6 billion that we're getting ready to award for implementation of measures from these climate action plans that does say, why do you need this money from this program? Because there's so much else out there. So that is part of our evaluation criteria also, to sort of force that thinking and answering the question, what else is out there and what have you done to try to tap into it. So it's not a direct answer to your question, but it's at least some of the mechanics.
Great.
Well, like, so for Georgia, we already, like, in our plan, which we did not name it the PCAP. We started to, and then I got told we had to change the name. So ours is the Peach State Voluntary Emissions Reduction Plan, which is wonderful in the sense that EPA supports the fact that you accept us how we are. All right, and Georgia is interesting sometimes, and I'll take it. But so one of the things, you know, we run a diesel engine replacement grant. So, you know, in ours, when we're talking about if we wanted to update school buses or we wanted to update fleet buses or fleet cars, we had to make sure that we pulled in there, here's all the pieces that we've already looked at, and here's where there is a lack of funding, and then this is how this could support that. And that feeds into the implementation grant applications. It does the same with our forestry. It does the same with all of the pieces that we looked at. We really tried to delve into, here's what we're already doing, here's what's available, and then when we're talking to the different groups, it was important to say, okay, well, where have you looked? And then here's this potential pot of money if you can fit into, you know, the confines of it. And so for Georgia, we've never had I won't say we've never had a climate plan. I think we had a former governor that did write one, but did not go very far. He now runs our university system of Georgia. I think it's Purdue. We've never had one and never had to pull this together. So for us, we're starting from ground zero, and it's a lot about talking to and getting out. I laugh and say that I've spent the last year in meetings, and from July or June 1st to December 30th, I was in 145 meetings. And that was so that I could talk to the communities, I could talk to the regional commissions, the nonprofits, the manufacturers. I talked to Innovian, I talked to Train, I talked to as many people as we possibly could so that we could get their input of what is it that they want to do so that we could encompass that into our plan to the best we can. I've still had some that have popped up with things this week, and I'm like, I'm sorry, you're out of luck now. But
The comprehensive plan.
that's later. I'll get to that later. But trying to really encompass what do the citizens and the cities and the communities in Georgia want us to include into that plan. And I know I didn't talk to everyone, but I sure have talked to a lot of people that I feel like we have done at least a good faith effort of trying to get that information.
Fair to say that 145 meetings with stakeholders about climate abatement or voluntary emission reductions that would not have happened without the plan, without the program.
None of this would have happened.
Yeah.
I would be doing my normal full-time job, which is not this, but yes.
This isn't my full-time job either.
Conor?
Yeah, just a couple of quick. I definitely want to hear any other questions that the audience has, so we'll try to be kind of brief about it. And one element you're talking about durability in terms of future efforts, like how to kind of make this lasting, is that it's not. There needs to be, and it's such what Anna says, well, there needs to be grassroots support for these types of investments, and that's an all hands on deck effort from our end, from the states, to make sure that folks know about what's in these plans, that we're communicating with stakeholders, that we're hosting community engagement meetings, that we're incorporating the priorities of the folks that show up to those. But as Anna can attest, and anybody who works in government can attest, that public engagement meetings, it's not the biggest group of people that shows up to those. That's not truly the most representative of the broader population a lot of times. Lovely to have the input. It's a lot of really strong opinions on different issues that I learn a ton from every single time I go. But unless folks know that these things are connected to the investments that are being made by the federal government, by the Inflation Reduction Act, by these broader forces and these other federal initiatives at play, it's going to be real easy for folks to get rid of them. and because there's not going to be a groundswell of support. Like I think back to like it's not the climate, but the healthcare example when the Congress tried to roll back the ACA, and it didn't happen because there was enough time built up, enough groundswell of support where folks rebelled back and were like, no, you can't take this away. You're not going to roll this back. If there was an opportunity to do that a few years earlier and not enough groundwork had been put in and not enough word of mouth had spread from anybody and everybody who's interested and cared about the topic, it probably the vote may have gone a different way. And that's the thing that worries me the most about these broader investments right now, is that if folks don't know what's going on, and we're doing our best to, but it's also everybody else in this room, talk to friends, talk to family, like just make sure that everyone knows that there are good things happening right now from these plans and from these investments and everything else, that's going to be the biggest thing, I think, to make it durable. Because if it's durable, then, and folks know about the impacts, then, and as far as this money's going, as many different states, the fact that, like you said, meeting people where they are, and except in Georgia for who you guys are, if the groundswell of support forms in Georgia for these investments, and there's some votes that are needed, important votes that are needed to kind of keep it around, that's going to be kind of the pivotal role here, in my opinion, to kind of keep these things moving forward. So it's not just our job, it's everybody else's job too.
And can I add, because we're trying to stage this out. The money, we're trying to get out the door as fast as we can. Not going to use the word crisis. We know this need is urgent. We're late. We got to get it out the door and get the investments made, right? So our $4.6 billion, we are trying to charge through and get that out to the best possible, most ambitious, biggest reduction type projects that we get applications for. I don't want to forget about the low income and disadvantaged community benefit goals also, but maybe we can circle back to that. But the point I wanted to make in relation to this point, so from a staging standpoint, we had our priority climate action plan that relates to the implementation grant applications. We're going to implement what's in your plan, come and get it, make it your best shot. The comprehensive climate action plans next year, there's no guaranteed funding for implementation, but they're still required. And the hope is that this is starting to take off and gain momentum, right? All of this, everything we've been talking about for 2 days. We will then have a third deliverable for these planning grantees, the states and cities, et cetera, at year 4. So those are going to be doing 2027 at this point. And those are going to be updates to the comprehensive climate action plans. Those are required under the grant. And those are going to be the point at which our grant is done. But that last deliverable is the final opportunity under this program as it exists today for the states and the cities to come back and say, here's how it's been panning out for us. Here's the stuff that's worked. Here's what hasn't. Here's our updated, view of budget. Workforce development is another big part of all of this planning, so we can get into that if that's interesting to people. But the point here is we are trying to extend the life of this money, if you will, through the planning aspect so that it's a constant, oh yeah, so y'all are going to be working on plans here for the next 4 years. Because that's what it's going to take, is revisiting what were the assumptions we made 2 years ago? How did that pan out? What does the budget look like? What's the investment environment? What's the context? 2027, we don't know. And so that's what another aspect of the program and how we've designed it.
I'm going to take a question right here. Project, and I'll repeat it, people can hear it.
So looking at these programs, I see a lot of similarity to the Clean Air Act provisions, but targeted at carbon. And I remember during the Obama administration, getting carbon dioxide as a criteria pollutant was going to be one of the EPA's primary methods for beginning to decarbonize. And I see this as sort of like a less regulatory approach to do that. How do you think that the role of regulation is changing, or ways that it's still important as we move more towards subsidizing rather than direct regulation?
You were looking at me when you asked that question, but I don't know if I should. Fine.
I
could be candid if you
Yeah, well, you could ask it. I can answer it. I've exited the agency. But Conor, you're
have an opinion.
Let Conor go.
Let Conor go.
Sure.
Take care of that, Conor.
I mean, the first thing I want to do is attack the premise of the question. No, I'm just kidding. The answer, well, the real answer, honestly, though, is that it's not that we're moving away, not that, at least how I see the general landscape, is not that we're moving away from regulation, is that we're complementing it with more investment to make it easier to adhere to the regulations that are still capping different levels of pollution. Like I know Administrator Regan yesterday just talked about like all the new tailpipe emission standards that just came out that are the most aggressive for medium and light duty vehicles that EPA has ever created, and it's expected. I just wrote up a summary for that this morning, so I'm remembering in my head now that it's 56% of reduced carbon emissions by 2032. Expected to some scenarios up to 52%, I think, of new sales would be electric vehicles. I think by 2032 was the number. Yeah, so it's a rapid build out. That type of growth, we can make this type of program. We can, like Anna was saying, we can invest in manufacturing, invest in incentives to try to get people to kind of voluntarily pick up EVs. We can use the money to invest in charging infrastructure to make it easier to adhere to get to those levels. But that extra push is still going to come from regulations. This just kind of complements it and makes everything go faster.
And on top of that, then there's the new greenhouse gas regulation that'll go for the power plants. So they've attempted to regulate those a few times. So that we refer in our office, we refer to it as Clean Power Plan 3.0. But so the next round of that also will be coming. So I see it as these plans are a complement to what will eventually come down the pike, and that these are more voluntary or what is your state capable of doing, and then we'll have the complementing regulations that will go along with it, that then my office gets to write the plans for the power industry to show how they would comply with those.
One more quick comment on that, and just is that there's also provision in the program, in this program in particular, Climate Pollution Reduction Grants, that says that we, at the state level, cannot use any money that we possibly may receive from this to comply with existing regulations, which has made a lot more meetings for me with a lot of other people to make sure that my harebrained schemes are not actually overlapping with existing regulations. So I know for a fact that it's extra on top of it.
It doesn't actually say existing.
I'm going to go to that back right there.
New or existing.
New or existing. Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, please.
Yes, so do you know if there will be any later application deadlines? And do you know how innovative, and I'm sure you do, how innovative and fun if it's an innovative technology that's under development, does that qualify for anything?
So we can't really talk too much about the implementation grants, but I can answer your question, which is this is it. April 1st is the deadline for our general competition, $4.3 billion to implement plans, measures contained in PCAPs. So the innovation transformative impact is one of our evaluation criteria that's out there publicly. But the point is that it's the competition is April 1st for states and locals. That's their deadline. And then we have a separate competition being run for $300 million for implementation grants just for tribes and territories. That's due May 1st, but again, everything is linked to these priority climate action plans, so that it really is very methodical and sort of, it's in the plan, it's, and then the implementation money is to implement those measures.
Well, and you could include some innovative things in our plan. So we put sustainable aircraft fuel, we did biogas generation from your cow manure and pig waste and such. And so trying to, come up with things that are on the cusp of and important. If it's listed in your state's plan, then you could go after it. You have to write a grant, you become a grant writer overnight, and as I laugh, I said a year ago I had never written a grant. Now I've written 2, so I guess I'm now officially a grant writer. So, thank you.
Can I actually ask one? I'm going to take the prerogative to say two things. One is what the interesting thing is Megan just observed and has observed, this is the most flexible program in the IRA. You can get funding for whatever greenhouse gas reductions you put in your plan. Then you have to justify it under the metrics that they put out publicly that include how transformative it is, but it is the most flexible thing. The second thing is Megan is right, and she probably never wants there to be any more money in this program, but there are people out there who are talking about reappropriating the program. If this works really well, why can't we ask Congress to take a second round? But it would take another act of Congress to do that. All right, I saw a lot of hands up here, so I am going to go to this gentleman here and then to the woman in the back.
See, more people should have shown up to this panel. We're getting a lot of questions. I don't know why everybody left.
Yeah, this is mostly for Anna, but also for Megan as like a broader overview of the program. So I was just wondering, I know you can't talk about like the plans for implementation specifically, but how is the expansion of like public transportation infrastructure being incorporated into like what this broader plan? I know you talked a lot about like hydrogen and electric vehicles and all of that stuff, but you know, innovating is great, but we already have something that works really well for reducing carbon emissions. And if you've ever lived in Atlanta, you know like the traffic is.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's a joy. And our public transit is a train wreck. It's okay. So,
Not literally.
right? What, have you?
Hopefully not literally, your public transit.
It's not, no, there's not an actual train
That was
wreck.
an unfortunate pun.
Yes, no. So to tell you what we've done and looked at in Georgia, we didn't just talk, so I'm environmental protection. I do air quality. I write the air rules, we update the plans, I send them to EPA so that we can run our programs, so that the companies can be built and can get their air permits and can function, and we have all of the checks and balances. So that's my normal day-to-day thing. And we understand the greenhouse gas emissions. We understand emissions very well. We do emission inventory. So as a part of our process, we were tasked, you need to include and create a steering committee that's not just EPD, that does environmental. So we talked with DOT, the Atlanta Transit Link Authority, Economic Development, our Environmental Finance Office, GFA, but then, so Atlanta also received the planning grant, and we've been in conversation with Atlanta, and Atlanta's ARC, which is the one that received the money for that one, they've been working with the Atlanta area and MARTA and others. So we have been trying to pull all the pieces together as best we can and get their input of what do they want, what do they need us to include, so that we can make sure that a e-bike rebate program is something that can be utilized throughout multiple states and multiple cities like Atlanta and Columbus and Athens and Savannah. And then also talking with MARTA to see what else could they use and utilize. And they are converting a lot of their buses. They've already got CNG buses, but now shifting some to electric or to propane and things of that nature. So we at least attempted to incorporate what we could into our plan and ARC's plans, so that if there was innovations and advancement for our public transit, not necessarily expanding the public transit, but maybe making improvements and in making it in efficiencies, making it better, that we hope that we gathered that in both of our plans.
I'm going to try and get at least one or two more questions in. So the woman in the back there. Yes, you.
Hi. Can you speak more about the workforce development you mentioned a minute ago? I'm particularly interested in what do states need to be doing now to prepare for the trainings that are going to be needed? What kind of technologies do we need to be putting into our community college systems? And what are the barriers we need to be removing so that when all the money hits, we're able to actually meet that demand of the workers?
Yeah. Well, that's a great set of questions. So let me just tell you what we are requiring of our grantees to include in their plans, and we're leaving sort of the big answers to they need to be asking themselves those questions that you're posing. I don't have the answers to how they're going to, what their answers are. What we stipulated in the grant conditions was in in the comprehensive climate action plan that's going to be due in over a year, we want a workforce development analysis, and that needs to sort of conduct, and the truth is we probably need to offer a little bit more training on this, because this is not what EPA normally does. So I'm probably the least qualified to answer this question. But the idea is to, with an eye toward high quality, good paying jobs. They like to throw around the union jobs a lot, this administration. So can we see that laid out and in these plans? And so this is the sort of element of these plans that, because we are also requiring our grantees to not only talk across, within the government at interagency and intra-agency conversations that may not have previously happened. So I'm pretty proud of that. Bringing people to the table who probably don't talk to each other very much, but also to do the stakeholder outreach, talk to everyone in the community, especially because we are looking to prioritize benefits to low-income and disadvantaged communities, get them to the table, brainstorm together, conduct meaningful involvement, and I feel like the workforce development piece is going to probably come out of that as well, which is, so I don't have a really good answer for you other than we're asking for it so that we also can learn what are some of the best practices. We do give a little bit of guidance for the, the notice that explains how the implementation grant applications are going to be evaluated. We do give some explanation of what we're looking for in high quality jobs. And then as a community benefit, that there's workforce development embedded in the design of whatever projects are being proposed. So I wish I had a fuller answer for you, but maybe in a year I can answer that question more fully.
Well, we've started our analysis.
Oh, good.
We had one, but decided it was not fully formed enough to put it into our initial plan. But we're looking across the sectors. We have there's the 7 different sectors. We have 21 different measures in our plan that we could take advantage of, or any government entities in Georgia could take advantage of. So we have to, part of it is that you're having to go through and use the policy simulator that a lot of us used to quantify what would the changes be, how will this impact jobs, and what would it be, and what will be the needs, and what are the gaps. So that's what I'm envisioning is going to look like. I don't have a full answer.
Can I take a stab at this one real quick? I know we're keeping tabs on time. My colleague, Andrea DeSantis, is at another panel right now, and you said the 2 magic words, to where if I don't take this opportunity, she's going to hunt me down later. You said, or technically 3 magic words, workforce and community colleges. So we have, in the governor's office, we have it's a nonprofit arm. Really weird. I don't really understand how it fully functions and works, or how it exists in its current form, but essentially it's a nonprofit in the governor's office. It's been around through multiple administrations for decades now. It's called the North Carolina Business Committee for Education, and Andrea's on that, and she's kind of came on board as an education policy advisor, but has been roped in, and that whole team has become honorary members of the climate and clean energy team to try to build out workforce investments and work with community colleges to stand up new curriculums, looking at EV charging deployment manufacturers and technicians. There's a huge, anybody that I just leased my first EV a few weeks ago and have quickly realized how frustrating it is to show up into a parking deck and see a charger that's out of service for 3 months because the local government or city in Durham just can't find enough folks to be able to hire to kind of keep it up and running. So that's just one specific example. One thing I know we're looking at are ways to figure out how to build cross-cutting skills. So any folks that are working as, if you can get some, and this isn't vast oversimplification, but there's transferable skills between working as an electrician to be able to work across solar installations or EV deployment or charger installations, working on a host of electrification types of projects. They're not all the same. There's nuances between, but to the extent that we can set up a pipeline to build those fundamental skills for folks that are coming just straight out of high school and looking for maybe not a 4-year education, maybe even some type of getting some different type of trades programs back into high schools to prepare for these types of things. This year is the year of public education, and anybody in North Carolina has seen Governor Cooper kind of traveling all over the map, visiting community colleges and schools everywhere, trying to kind of raise awareness of the public education crisis that we have going on here, and the need to more fully fund schools and these different programs. And in the spirit of cooperation, both Georgia and North Carolina are leading the way in terms of developing the battery belt and EV manufacturing here in the Southeast. And
We have a cooler tagline than
I
you do.
understand, but I haven't thought about it. But anyway, all that being said, there's a lot of things that need to happen very quickly to be able to build out the workforce needed for all of these things that have some overlapping skill sets in between, where folks can kind of get flexibility to hop around into different careers and get opportunities.
All right, we are, first of all, at time, past time. I think we'd be willing to take a question or two more, because we know there's nobody after us, right?
Right.
So we are happy to do that. Question right here.
Yeah, I was curious about interstate collaboration, especially thinking about tribes and like how they're often smaller and are actually confronting climate change much more aggressively than a lot of states, and some of the smaller states, perhaps in the Northeast. Is there any incentive in this program for interstate collaboration or energy sharing, grid updating, that kind of stuff?
Did Tim pay you to ask that question?
I was like, you want to take that?
You want to take it?
Yes, I will take the question, and you can correct. The reason they're referring to me is because I'm part of a coalition, the Duke Nicholas Institute. Actually, Alex, who was here a moment ago from the UNC Institute of Environment, we are part of a coalition that works with the state governments on their climate and energy transition planning. And in doing that, we've actually organized, with the encouragement of what EPA put into their notice of funding opportunity, a number of coalitions for very, very much the same reasons that you just described. That there's places where the climate investment really is better thought of as to be a multi-jurisdictional or up and down the levels of jurisdiction project, and not bound by the jurisdiction. One example coalition I know about is working on working lands up and down the Mid-Atlantic coast, and trying to make sure we conserve carbon in wetlands and things like that. So. Natural ecosystems don't know that they're in South Carolina, North Carolina, or Virginia. They're all interconnected ecologically. So yes, there was a great encouragement from the agency. The one thing I want to say, and why Megan's, I think protective is the agency, when it comes to giving out federal resources, has to be very careful that it does things in a very publicly available way, that everybody has equal opportunity for the same knowledge to have the same chance to get I think when you get into a federal funding program, it's absolutely essential you do that, because you really need people to have the trust that the money's going out to equally situated applicants. So one of the reasons we're being very careful about this is so there's no ability for anybody to communicate anything to her that not every other applicant to her program is going to have. I just want to make sure we said that out loud. Yeah. Megan?
I just wanted to add, because you asked about tribes, and they play a very special role, and we have a very special relationship with them, and we want to respect it and be protective of it. So I mentioned that, so we have 90 planning grants going to tribes through directly to tribes or through tribal consortia who represent, groups of tribes. So we're touching about 225 federally recognized tribes through the planning grants of the 400 some odd, or 374, I think. EPA recognizes 374 federally recognized tribes. So it's a good number. And so for the implementation grants, the coalition concept is highlighted under both the competitions, both the general competition for, let's say, a state can work with a tribe, and that tribe could come in, in their plan, and the tribe could come in for the implementation grants and say, I want to implement, for my people, this certain measure that's included in the state's PCAP that I coordinated with them on. So we've really tried to make it possible for people who didn't necessarily get a planning grant to be part of the implementation grant competition. We also have that separate $300 million set aside for just tribes and territories. It's only 4 territories we're talking about, so it's mostly tribes. And so I am very hopeful that we're going to be able to deliver to tribes around this country, in a way that they haven't had access to before, and that we'll be able to, find good projects that can enable them to meet their purposes, along with what we're trying to do, which is greenhouse gas reductions. Adaptation, resilience is very much on their minds, and there's a lot we can do together.
Well, and through the Conveners Network, I talk to my southern states all the time, and that's a normal part of business, but it's been very good to be able to talk with almost, spanning the entire United States. And so sometimes I may not be able to relate to, like, say, Washington, Oregon, or California, but Arkansas is very similar to what we deal with, or Oklahoma, or several others throughout the Midwest and such. I call them honorary southern states, because they end up having similar political climate that we do. And so we can really relate and work together, and now everyone's on a same playing field, that there's no benefit or disadvantage of those of us that didn't have a climate plan already. We can learn from the ones that have put some together and hear some of the things that have worked, but then we can band together as those that have never put one together and go, okay, how do we do this? And just jump in feet first and can help each other to do that. So, I've been on calls of them spanning the entire United States, and I get to talk to people that I would not have normally been able to bump elbows with.
That's great. All right, I'm going to respect everybody's Friday evenings, and thank you for your attendance and your interest, and thank Conor, Megan, and Anna for such a wonderful discussion, and thank you to Dr. Ganji and UNC for hosting us for really a great multiple week-long almost conference. So join me in giving a round of applause for the group here.